The path forward will require a combination of old lessons learned, particularly on the fiscal front, applied in the service of ingenuity to overcome economic stagnation in some countries and to maneuver geopolitical tensions, potentially intensifying in the coming years.
Hello, this is the Weekly Tradecast, a podcast brought to you by UN Trade and Development. I'm Sarah Toms. We're exploring how major events are shaping trade and development and how that affects billions of people around the world. This week, we're looking at the trends in South-South trade, along with some challenges on the horizon, with Giselle Datz, an expert in the global political economy at Virginia Tech. Throughout modern history, wealthy nations in the North have been consuming food, minerals, and other goods from developing countries, most often found in what's called the Global South. But in recent years, the patterns of market power have been shifting within Asia, Latin America, and Africa, with profound implications for the global economy and development. The latest UN Trade and Development report says that South-South trade has more than doubled since 2007. In 2003, that trade within the Global South was worth $5.6 trillion. But there are many risks in a turbulent world. Against this backdrop, Donald Trump, the new US president, takes office with threats of tariffs and protectionism. For more on what lies ahead for the Global South, I'm joined by Giselle Datz, Associate Professor in the Government and International Affairs Program at Virginia Tech. Her interests include debt restructuring, economic policy reforms, and financial development. And Giselle's regional focus is on Latin America. The views in this episode are those of the guest. So welcome to the show, Giselle. Thanks for coming on. Now, the Global South is obviously a diverse collection of many countries. So where are there common goals and opportunities?
Thank you, Sarah. It's great to talk to you. Well, the common aspirations of many of the countries in the Global South are really not new. They seek louder voices in multilateral governance and alternative means of representation through their own international institutions. And domestically, aspirations, goals include significant productivity improvements that will increase growth, diversifying, importantly, their production bases, maintaining monetary stability in some cases so hardly fought for, reducing indebtedness, and transitioning to a greener economy that can create more, but also better jobs, particularly for low-skilled workers. So opportunities exist, and predictably, they demand political will. And less visible in this sense, but also crucial, are tax policies and overall administrative reforms that not only improve tax collection, but also make customs policies and procedures more efficient and eliminate the unnecessary bureaucratic burdens on business activity, particularly for small and medium enterprises.
South-South trade has been talked about and practiced for some time now, for decades, in fact. What would you say is different now, and where is this trajectory going in the future?
To mention two regions, for example, China became South America's main trading partner, its major source of foreign direct investment and development finance for this region. China's unprecedented demand for commodities has boosted South American exports, but also increased commodity dependence on the part of these exporters. Now we can foresee that rising global tensions will likely add to the volatility of commodity prices and will inevitably expose commodity-dependent countries' key vulnerabilities. In Asia, China's economic transformation was a crucial driver of regional trade integration through global value chains. For all the discussion of globalization as expanding production to the wide South, we know global value chains are in reality very concentrated in terms of industrial sectors and geography. So it's hard to envision change in this South-South trade dynamics in the short term, apart from the ways in which a renewed war between the US and China on trade may redirect commerce within Asia. Bilateral trade deals between China and many Latin American countries are likely to be ongoing. But of course, we will also have to see the extent to which Chinese economic deceleration will impact these trade flows.
So, Giselle, we've all heard Donald Trump is threatening big tariffs on US trading partners. What will these new tariffs and more protectionism mean for the Global South and all its ambitions?
So we can expect this ongoing protectionist trajectory in the US to become even more restrictive. A renewed trade war between US and China will, as before, spill over to Asian economies through supply chains. Some Asian countries will feel the negative impact of reduced US demand for Chinese goods in the form of reduced Chinese demand for their own intermediary goods exported to China. But some other countries, like Vietnam, will benefit from trade redirection outside of China, as has already happened to some extent. The threat of significant higher tariffs imposed on Mexican products will, of course, create greater challenges to the Mexican economy. Even more broadly, protectionism, or a rise and even further rise in protectionism against Mexico and other developing countries, will also put the US in a difficult position when it comes to trying to reduce China's economic reach and political influence in the Global South.
So where can the Global South perhaps exert the biggest influence to reshape the global economy and also the global financial system?
Certainly, this is a time of uncertainty in terms of some policy directions, particularly on the US, and a time of political change in other parts of the world. But I can think of two key areas through which the Global South can exert this important influence. Your own 2024 UNCTAD Trade and Development Report tells us a story of globalization at an inflection point in what you call an age of discontentment. And this is surely an apt description of our days. The political backlash against globalization and trade integration in particular is mostly, however, an advanced economies predicament where it has been relatively easy to scapegoat trade liberalization for economic dislocations that are also, but significantly, a product of technological innovation. This trade pessimism in some advanced countries contrasts, however, starkly with the impressive growth trajectories of the vibrant economies in the Global South, like China, India, Vietnam. And countries in the Global South then know that there's hardly a path out of economic stagnation that does not pass through trade integration. A positive sign of that has been very recently the agreement finally struck between Mercosur, the trade area among some South American countries, and the EU. And that was after 25 years of negotiations. This would be the world's largest trade union. It still has to be approved through political processes in Europe that could derail the progress so far. But we know that the obstacles to a completed agreement lay in Europe, not in South America. This tells us something. Global trade always counted on strong advocates. This was done by the US and other advanced economies for the most part in the past century. We may see developing countries taking on the mantle going forward. A second area in which the Global South can take a necessary and very important step in the right direction has to do with sovereign debt transparency. A clear problem, as you know, now is the level of sovereign indebtedness, particularly in developing countries who by and large face higher debt servicing costs. In many low-income countries, the real extent of indebtedness can be difficult to assess, however, as UNCTAD and the World Bank have highlighted in their studies. We know that debt restructuring deals are already protracted because of the difficulties in coordinating the interests of very diverse creditors in the absence of a global sovereign bankruptcy mechanism for economies already in great distress. We can demand creditors to be more transparent, and we must, but debtor governments must also fully commit to this goal in the first place.
One thing we haven't looked at yet is how can South-South trade better support equitable development and really add value to their economies?
Yes, the big question now, Sarah, is indeed about what are the paths to growth available to countries in this post-industrial age? Or more pragmatically, even, how can developing countries generate jobs that will not only reduce poverty, but grow a middle class that can rely on formal employment with old age pensions that can meet new demographic challenges? We have more questions than answers, but there's no one model to emulate without major adaptations. So as the UNCTAD Trade and Development Report again has highlighted, more attention should be paid to labor-absorbing services, not as a substitute, but as a complement to other more traditional elements in development strategies. These, of course, along with the green transition, will require a very well-tailored public investment strategy, since developing countries' fiscal constraints are likely here to stay. But of course, it is possible to see significant improvements. Countries in the global south have shown themselves incredibly inventive. They have also shown to be much more resilient to monetary policies and even financial distress from abroad. So the path forward will require a combination of old lessons learned, particularly on the fiscal front, applied in the service of ingenuity to overcome economic stagnation in some countries and to maneuver through geopolitical tensions, potentially intensifying in the coming years.
Right. Well, there's a lot on the to-do list there, Giselle. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
That was Giselle Datz, Associate Professor at Virginia Tech, who was this week's guest. And there's even more on our website, unctad.org. I'm Sarah Toms in Geneva. Goodbye for now.